Welcome, everyone. I'm Yanir Baryam, and I will make my opening remarks. And here we go. There is a broad understanding of what would improve our world. In public health, focus attention on the prevention of manifest harms. In economics, circulate available and abundant resources so people can live well and contribute. In security, align systems for protection rather than domination and conflict. In environment and ecology, recognize runaway exploitative loops and treat them as part of the system so they become sustainable. These are not partisan statements. They are practical imperatives widely shared by those who study how systems work and fail. The problem is not uncertainty about what must be done. It is the need for systems that do it. Our institutional, corporate, and political systems are failing to act on these imperatives, whether through perverse short-term motivation or institutional incompetence. At this meeting, the imperative is to develop the ability to move into real-world action. In the real world, which is fragmented, constrained, politicized, and conflicted. We need to build organizations that transcend what we have now through teamwork and coordination. No, we need to become such an organization. After this session, we're going to build teams. So let's talk about teams for a moment. Imagine 5 people on a team. If each person can do 10 different things, how many things can they do together? It's not just 10 things. It's not just 10 plus 10 plus 10. It's 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. I think I said it not 4 times, so times 10. That's 100,000 combinations. This simple idea is the source of the incredible complexity of what we can do together. It's not just effort added up. It's capability multiplied. That's the power of collaboration, and that's what we're here to build. You could call it combinatorial power, the richness that emerges when different strengths, experiences, and actions interact. That's my introduction. Welcome again. And we're going to now go, and I'm going to pull up my sheet. We're going to go to Adam Finkel, who is also a co-organizer of Unpolitics, former director of health standards in OSHA, and a national leader in regulatory science, risk analysis, and public health ethics. Go ahead, friend, Adam. And you have to unmute if you're muted. Adam, you're muted.
Got it. Sorry. When I shared my whole screen, I lost my my taskbar here. I'm audible, right? Sorry about that.
Yes, perfect.
And now I just have to find my screen again. Screen sharing is paused. All right. Sorry. Well, great to be here. Yanir, thank you so much for involving me in this. I see a lot of very old friends in the gallery and some new friends who I've only met virtually. So fasten seatbelts. I'm going to try to do this in 5 minutes. I want to talk about how analysis and studying problems gets in the way of getting stuff done. So be aware of the subtitle here. We want to get beyond unmet aspirations, myopic victories, and defensive cowering. This distinction, I think, is easy to understand. Goals help us to worry. But actions, even though they may be insufficient one at a time, they at least marshal our capabilities. We don't just want to hang the mission accomplished banner. We want to get stuff done. But I think the harder distinction to understand is that we are all hardwired to believe that naming the problem and understanding the problem has to come first. How can you possibly get stuff done aimlessly? That's half the story. But the other half is that I believe it's very fundamentally true that you can't make lives better and whatever else you want to achieve without understanding and comparing solutions. And as soon as we define the problem, we close the door on many solutions that might be preferable. little cartoon here is the person who goes into the doctor and says, my pants are too tight. The solution is not get bigger pants. The solution is to look for the root causes of the real problem, not the Band-Aid on the problem. So instead of asking what is the problem and how bad is it, we should be asking more, how can we fulfill a human need or desire or non-human species, whatever we care about, with more net benefit and less injustice than at the present day. So we should be asking things like, what do we know how to do? What will doing one of these possible things bring to the world in terms of benefits and costs? And could we obtain even more benefit at equal or less cost by doing something else? So here's one example. It's in my domain, but there are many parallel examples in other people's domains. The single-use plastic water bottle. When I was a kid, there were exactly 0 of these made anywhere in the 70s. Now we have 50 billion in the United States, 500 billion worldwide. 1/500th of all the energy in the country goes into making these plastic bottles. And it's got great implications for carbon footprint, for disposal, for leachate, nanoplastics, etc. The wonderful agency, at least wonderful until January, the US EPA, has been defining the problem for 20 plus years as cleaning the water inside the bottle, getting the bisphenol A down to some number of parts per billion. Bisphenol F comes along as a substitute, it's equally bad, get that down to some number of parts per billion, and so on and so on. But no one is asking, how can we fulfill the function, provide humans with clean, ready, cold, safe drinking water without the 500 billion units? And we used to know how to do that. This is not even an example where we've never done it. This is one where we did it before with infrastructure, with drinking fountains, but we stopped doing it. So many other examples that I hope we'll talk about in the teams this week. That's a picture of the Monarca project in central Mexico. Incentives to preserve the unique, very small habitat there. And you can look at your leisure at the slides for other examples. We're going to talk later today and through the week about the tired old objections to beneficial action. Wonderful book by A.O. Hirschman from the early 1990s, The Rhetoric of Reactionaryism. And his 3 tired objections are: 1, it'll make the problem worse. Seat belts will cause people to drive faster. Well, there's some merit to that, but not if people are informed about the perverse consequences. Secondly, it'll only make a small dent in a big problem. And when my daughter was at grammar school, her school was called the Starfish, because they kept repeating this parable that, yeah, throwing one starfish back in the water that's stuck on land is not going to help the species, but it did matter to that starfish. And then third, it will make something else worse. And there's a big literature in my world about making other risks worse by making some risks better. And my response as a regulator was always, yeah, there's some truth in that. Let's fix both problems, and let's just not let one be the enemy of the other. So we'll talk about picking winners and losers. Tomorrow, we'll talk about science and uncertainty and policy. And then finally, the age-old, well, yes, somebody should be doing that, but not me. And my response to that is that the one small silver lining of what we're experiencing in the US this year is that when normal people come back to power, there may actually be organizations that had structural problems from their very beginnings that could now finally be retooled and rebuilt out of those ashes to enable them not to say, this is not my turf, and it is no one's turf.
Adam, quickly, I'm going to interject to let you know that ding that you all heard, hopefully, that was a 30-second signifier just to wrap within the next 30 seconds. Take your time. We're still ahead, but I think you've got enough time to wrap.
No, almost done. Here's a slide that someone can read at their leisure. Wendy Wagner's on the Zoom. I owe the other people who thought of solution-focused thinking long before I came along. And I'll just finally say, here's Elon's edict from his short time in government. Everybody needs to tell me what they did this week. If you don't, you'll be resigning. There's a little humor on the right-hand side, a little Rick Astley. But it struck me that when I was in government at OSHA and EPA, I never micromanaged or tried to hound people with what did you do this week. On the other hand, inaction has consequences. And I did bring my group together. I ran the regulatory wing for a while, and then I was an enforcement official with a bigger staff. And we talked weekly, monthly, yearly. What are we doing? What have we done? Because I wanted people to understand that while we're working, we are accepting the status quo, and the status quo has costs and benefits. And if we can do better, delay is a choice, and a very consequential choice. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Adam, can you stop sharing so that others can, because I don't know how. Let me just say continue. Maybe I can do this.
And if somebody will just tell me how to, here we go. I saw it. All right, great.
So Adam invited Nicholas Kristof to share a recorded video. Who is going to share it? I can do it, but if someone else has it, that's great.
No, you
Nicholas,
should here. Go ahead.
okay, I will do it. Nicholas Kristof is, let me just go ahead with the video and then we'll do that. And here we go.
We don't see the video.
Here it is.
There it is. Okay.
So the sharing is on, and here is the video.
Welcome to all of you attending the Unpolitics conference. I'm Nicholas Kristof. I'm a columnist for the New York Times. I'm an author, and I'm a great believer in solutions journalism, which is a little bit parallel to what you're all wrestling with at this conference. And, you know, maybe solutions isn't even exactly the right term, because when we think of solutions, we think of completely solving a problem. And actually, the way the real world works, it's often mitigating it, but it doesn't quite sound so impressive, does it? You know, I think about improving auto safety. And since 1921, we've reduced auto accidents, fatal auto accidents per 100 million miles driven by more than 95%. But it wasn't one solution. It was a million little incremental solutions. It was, you know, padded dashboards. It was airbags. It was seatbelts. It was better designed highways. It was graduated driver's licenses for young people. It was crackdowns on drunk driving, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And in the same way, I think that, you know, around us, there are a lot of steps forward, if you will, advances that can make life better for all of us. I talk a lot about how we get more kids in school. And, you know, we think that the way to do that is you build schools. True, but there are other ways that are actually more cost effective. One study found that it would cost a few $100s in bricks and mortar building schools to get a marginal child into the school system, but that if you deworm a child with a, you know, one little pill of albendazole costing about 5 cents, then it only costs about 1/100th as much to get a marginal child in school, because that child is less anemic, the child is healthier, stronger, less sick, more able to go to school. And so that's the kind of thing that I'm thinking of in the areas that you'll be looking at. You know, I think about climate globally, and there are no perfect solutions, but simply in poor countries where drought is a real issue for crops, inducing famine, introducing kinds of millet that are drought resistant are real advances and give people an potentially iron-rich food that can improve well-being. In the economic sphere, I think about village savings and loans, which were a program pioneered by CARE in, I believe it was Mali, a couple of decades ago, and created a mechanism for people to save. Because, of course, in many poor villages, you don't have, people can't get access to bank accounts. And the way they saved traditionally was they would buy a goat. But a goat is not a very liquid form of savings. And these village savings and loans were very effective at that. One thinks about reducing conflict and bringing women into decision making in countries like Liberia or elsewhere has proved one way of making conflict less likely. And finally, disease. You know, disease is a big word. Lots of challenges, lots of people dying unnecessarily. One thinks about maternal mortality, and obviously one thing we have to be able to do is to provide emergency obstetric services, C-sections, for those who need it. But one little tiny thing one could do is provide these MMS multivitamins to women who are pregnant or likely to become pregnant soon. And they provide iron in a digestible way, which reduces anemia. And that means women are less likely to hemorrhage and die. That's what a major source of maternal mortality. And this costs just, just pennies. And so there are some little examples of things that I think about in terms of how we can find practical solutions to step forward, or practical advances, I guess I should say. And I'm sure that in this conference, you'll think of a lot more. So thanks for gathering. Thanks for all you do. And good luck for a terrific conference.
Great. And now we will move to John Hanley. He's also a co-organizer of Unpolitics, a U.S. Navy strategist and national security expert, integrating complexity science, strategic gaming, and institutional experience and analysis. Go ahead, John.
I'm honored to have the opportunity to speak with you today. I'll talk about sustainability, science, and trust. In 1990, the Cold War was winding down. Admiral Frank Kelso became Chief of Naval Operations. His decisions would shape the Navy for the next 30 to 50 years. So he tasked his strategic studies group with advising him what the nation would need the Navy to do over the coming decades. Focusing on a 20-year horizon, we examined trends in demographics, energy, economies, financial flows, infrastructure, technologies, climate change, etc. Yes, even Margaret Thatcher was concerned about climate change back then. And importantly, we studied U.S. revenues and expenditures. We found that accelerating costs of Social Security, medical care, and interest payments on national debt would put pressure on other federal spending. We also noted that the longer politicians took to make programs sustainable, the more difficult solutions would become. Payments on the national debt have now replaced defense as the second largest federal expenditure following Social Security. And the debt just got worse. The age of easy money for politicians is quickly coming to an end. The growing interest rate the U.S. Treasury must pay on its bonds is squeezing all other federal outlays. A financial earthquake could strike quickly, affecting the global economy, not just the U.S. Over the intervening 35 years, I've seen political gridlock in the U.S. Both Democrats and Republicans have been more interested in power and taking credit than resolving important national issues. The U.S. is not alone. Political dysfunction is the norm around the world. Our institutions are failing us, so here we are today. The major question is, what alternatives do we have? Unpolitics says we can't rely on the politics, but it doesn't suggest what next. One approach is being developed by Scott Page along with some colleagues. Scott will be talking to us tomorrow. They're looking at ensembles of organizations. Beyond democracies, their approach includes hierarchies, markets, civic action, and algorithms. UNIR has clearly demonstrated the limits of hierarchies in dealing with increasing complexity. Let me give just one example of an ensemble consistent with Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, The Serviceberry, which I highly recommend. More frequently, people are using apps to post items they're parting with free of charge. Others then arrange to pick them up. This simple economy represents an ensemble of markets, civic action, and algorithms. Our approach at this virtual conference is to address problems from the bottom up. Likely, we'll find features that apply to problems across the multiple domains we are addressing. Identifying features that govern the dynamics of systems across domains is the essence of complexity science. Science is another theme underlying this conference. Saying that we know a great deal about what needs to be done is based on our belief in science. If our science is so clear, why isn't it driving solutions? The primary factor is an absence of trust. Dysfunctional politics has caused people of all ages to mistrust their institutions. Research indicates that Gen Z trusts and prefers AI to personal interactions. Rather than reading news articles, they read comments made about those articles. Trust is foundational for all organizational forms. Lack of trust in the US dollar will be its undoing. Science does not come naturally to humans. It requires curiosity and perseverance. Few people practice science. Scientists are rewarded for communicating with each other rather than with non-scientists. Narratives do come naturally. If we're to make what we know needs to be done happen, it will be the stories we tell, accepting that many alternative narratives will suggest different solutions. Listening and adapting will be more important than talking. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And now to Anthony Staines, also a co-organizer of Unpolitics and a leader in Irish public health, respected for his work improving healthcare systems and advising on responses to public health challenges. Anthony, please.
I'm going to tell you two stories about changing things. One is about sunbed regulation. So I was asked in 2010 to join a group of people writing a report on the hazards to human health of electromagnetic fields, which was in the context of a nationwide panic about mobile phone masts, essentially, because that was the political context. I insisted, and I wrote a chapter in that on the hazards of ultraviolet light, which was not in our original specification at all. But our specification was drafted by a civil servant who just said electromagnetic fields and left it at that. And I also put that in our introduction, in our executive summary, which was the one-pager for the minister. That led directly to the first Irish regulation of sunbeds. The regulation was a bit weak, a bit watery, a bit woolly, but other people took it and ran with it. And we strengthened the regulations again in 2019. And we're hoping to strengthen the regulations again maybe next year. That was not on the political agenda anywhere before I wrote my chapter. That's a story about making change, how long it takes, the kind of completely random processes, because I met the minister in a corridor where he had come out from a meeting, and I asked him about something else, not about electromagnetic fields at all. And he mentioned the EMF to me in a casual conversation, and that's where it came from. The second story is that I used to run the blood transfusion service, and we were losing money because our costs were set, the charges we could set were set by our Department of Health. And they'd been set, I don't know when they'd been set, maybe 40 years ago, and increased slowly over time to allow for inflation. But they bore no relationship to the costs for our products. So we lost money on most of our products, and we had profit margins of 2,000% on one of our products. So we did a costing exercise to find out how much it all cost. And we spent 4 years, every year, presenting the costing exercise updated to the department, to our financial department, and saying, you know, we'll get into financial trouble if you don't adopt this. And 4 years down the line, they did. And we suddenly went from having a blood service that was financially very, very dangerously unstable to one that is financially stable to the present day. It took 4 years. And these kind of approaches are very typical for the kind of stuff people like me work on. It takes decades sometimes to change stuff. But there's two public health mottos I would draw to your attention. One is the perfect is the enemy of the good. If whatever you're planning to do makes things a bit better for at least some people, might well be worth doing, even if it doesn't fix a whole problem. And the other is that you never waste a good crisis, ever. And I would say public health in Europe, at least, and I think in the United States also, wasted COVID as a crisis. Now, there were very specific reasons which were quite different between the two sides of the Atlantic as to why that happened.
30 seconds remaining.
But it is something worth thinking about. Crises are opportunities for change. And you can seize a crisis and do things in a crisis. Wildfires in Canada come to mind. Flash floods in Texas come to mind, unfortunately. You can do things in a crisis that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. It looks like Texas will get its early warning river system. Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony. We are going to Margaret Cope, who's a retired U.S. Air Force colonel and expert in logistics and national security, with a vision for national service that may help shape how we build a global service for public good. And I will be sharing her presentation in just a second here. Go ahead, Margaret.
As a commander and senior leader, my career included a lot of oversight of highly skilled training, certifying and documenting on-the-job training and work experience to report readiness, along with capturing and developing our talent pool, which has led me to my passion of national service. Why do so many people distrust and dislike government? While attempting to improve society with education, we've provoked a backlash of less educated resentment. Let's not complain, but fix the system. With national service to educate, train, and share our moral value to serve. The new framework we are advocating for is a formal training program authorized by government and based on voluntary participation, and to provide a menu of opportunities for citizens between the ages of 18 to 26 to serve. Participants could join after high school, before college, after college, or instead of college. All volunteers would serve a minimum of 2 years and would receive lodging, uniforms, healthcare, food services, stipends, and upon completion of their service, numerous government incentives to include at least student loan forgiveness and/or education allowance similar to the GI Bill, and other options. As we know, the GI Bill in post-World War II was transformative by expanding the middle class and providing economic equity for future generations. By serving, we will bring together young people of different backgrounds, acculturation, promote civic engagement. The initial basic training would focus on government, history, communication, and will include recruits from all functional tracks. We will enhance overall social skills in society, improve overall trust in government and others, develop needed workforce skills, and remind all that being a good citizen comes with responsibilities and continuing engagement. There are a lot of opportunities to serve. Unfortunately, my slide didn't come through the way it was supposed to. Somehow Gmail converted it, but national service would be the umbrella organization for the entire enterprise, with the pillars being military service, which would include recruitment, orientation, training, and upon completion, obtaining dual benefits, national service benefits, along with the military benefits, the Corporation for National and Community Service, the Peace Corps, a revival of the Conservation Corps, a medical corps to include primarily nurses and CNAs, a legal corps, an administrative corps, a cyber corps, a cultural anthropology corps, world language corps, caregiver corps for children, special needs, and seniors, and finally, a journalism corps. Many of these national service positions could be used in a variety of ways. As a nation, we cannot underestimate the importance of our moral democracy to serve. Our country has a democratic form of government, which by definition is a participatory government, not a spectator government. All citizens must be engaged or we risk losing our democracy. Our founding fathers believed all would participate, as stated by George Washington, and I quote, "It may be laid down as a primary position in the basis of our system that every citizen who enjoys the protection of a free government owes not only a proportion of his property, but even of his personal services to defend it." Blue Star Families and the Bipartisan Policy Center led a research study showing that 2 recommendations that could easily be implemented would be to encourage young people to serve in the military and, a broader sense, national service. First, make registration for the Selective Service universal. Let all 18-year-old Americans, including women, know that if our nation needs them, they will be called upon. Secondly, require juniors in high school to take a vocational aptitude test. The military uses the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, ASVAB, to inform students and guides them to the best opportunities for success.
30 seconds remaining.
Additionally, start civics education in elementary school and carry it through high school. After 9/11, our country missed an enormous opportunity. Now, with the disruptive technology, our nation and our national security is dependent on capturing the best talent to be competitive globally. In Israel, national service is mandatory, and we have evidence that demonstrates how Israel has gone from non-distinct to one of the top 5 nations in cybersecurity. We must engage our greatest resource. Engaged, trained, and educated citizens will improve our government workforce, support our Constitution, and enable innovation, provide long-term fiscal sustainment, and enhance American and world prosperity.
Thanks, Margaret.
Thank you.
And
And I'll send a PDF with the slides.
I'm sorry?
I'll send a PDF with the
Please,
slides
yeah,
because
we
they
will
didn't come
post-
through correctly.
I apologize that the formatting didn't come through. David Mannheim is next. He's a policy researcher and risk analyst focused on emerging technologies and proactive strategies. He has a concept of low-hanging fruit to guide selection of projects for this week that will happen right after this session. So David, go ahead.
Okay, I have the privilege of following and speaking to a really impressive set of people. So hopefully I have something useful to say in the negative 2 minutes left until the half hour.
You take the right time.
Yeah, no, it's fine. A friend once told me if it takes more than 3 people and more than 3 steps to fix a problem, it won't get fixed. I don't like it, but she was mostly right. We've heard tons of great examples of pinpoint practical solutions by Nick Kristof and others, and getting key things onto the agenda from Tony Staines. But what good is finding 1 step or even 3-step fixes when we have a polycrisis of decaying climate, broken politics, failing institutions, and minimal trust, when the whole world feels like it's breaking? I know that we're people who identify big systemic problems, but broad reforms of complex systems are slow, fallible, and liable to suck the energy from people's efforts to fix anything, especially over a 1-week conference. So why focus on low-hanging fruit when we have real problems to solve? So first, I think the credibility of making a change gives you leverage for the future. And I think that this is an opportunity for everyone to start as a group to build that. Second, thankfully, it turns out that not every systemic problem requires complete systemic overhauls to fix. Narrow fixes can and do create big changes. Runaway systems feel inescapable, but escalating crises also can have weak points. When you're scared of financial crashes, a circuit breaker can halt a panic. If you're facing online distrust, you can build feedback layers that can start to rebuild that trust. So we can use systemic understanding to focus, but we can't focus too narrowly. Given the problems we face, we do need a broad understanding to identify viable narrow solutions. Thankfully, I think all the parts of the broad understanding that we need are here in the virtual room. Now we have the admittedly very tricky problem of trying to zoom in, identify specific high leverage problems, as Adam said, not focusing on how bad it is and finding actions that don't rule out solutions. But I'll add, I think, minimal actions to move the needle, and then figuring out how to make the changes happen. So what's the ideal marginal solution to each of your systemic problems? Obviously, I don't know, but I will again agree with Adam that many of the typical objections are shallow and tired. So I think that we still have some useful guidelines for what it is that we should be doing. When exploring each domain and sorting through possibilities, we will work together, but if you need lots of people's contributions, your odds will drop. If you have to convince the people first, your workload explodes. If coordination is required, guess who's going to be doing the coordinating? If the people you need to act can't take credit, why are they going to help? And if you expect them to figure anything out or spend their time or money or political capital, it's going to be hard. Practical solutions try to avoid these traps, or at least start by asking, which of the barriers can I remove now? In the best case, if you manage a clear, worked out, narrow solution, one that a specific person can understand and act on unilaterally and hopefully even take credit for, you're more than 90% of the way there. After that, all you need is their attention. But if you need to convince a large group of people, if the decision makers can't take credit, if they have to do the legwork themselves, then you better have a decade to make it happen. And we don't. We have a week. So here's my pitch. We all need to iterate on our understanding of the problems that we choose, generate dozens and dozens of ideas that could materially change the picture, and find ones that won't shoot off into the void the moment you're trying to implement them with all of these barriers. So our job isn't just to dream big, it's to think big picture, then dream tactically and brilliantly, but small. So this week, I hope we can find projects that are light enough to lift, sharp enough to matter, and grounded enough to land. And with that, back to you.
Thank you, David.